Hey everyone, I'm going to talk about 5 reasons of why you need to use an SSD. We're going to get into that right after this quick message. Alright everyone, so here are the 5 reasons of why we need to be using SSDs in our computers. The number 5 reason is they save so much space inside the case. Like, it's ridiculous. If you have a hard drive in your case, it's a big old bulky thing unless you're using like a laptop one, but even then, it still isn't all that great. Now with the M.2 SSDs, you don't even have to have cables. It plugs right into the motherboard and it just works amazingly that way. That way you don't have to worry about running power and SATA cables. It's just right into the board. And then there's your hard drive. That is so much more convenient. As you can imagine, this is a very popular option in laptops because you need to save all the space you can, and how modular laptops have become these days with them being thinner and everything else like that. So it is very important for space restrictions that you have an SSD. That is why I put this one at number 5, because it isn't the most critical thing, but it is an amazing feature that these drives have to offer. So now let's get to number 4. Number 4 is they have come down a lot in price. So back in the day, a lot of people could argue that SSDs were way too expensive. And that was a fair point. 1 terabyte SSD like 4 or 5 years ago, I seen them anywhere from, $1,000 on some of the drives. Like, it's insane. Maybe that wasn't 4 years ago, but a while ago. Like, if you wanted a substantial SSD, it was like, you were going to pay some pretty good money for it, like hundreds to maybe even, low thousand. So they have come down a lot. A good example of that is a 1 terabyte now is $147. It's not the M.2 one. The M.2 one and the smaller square SSD that like we seen at the beginning of the video here, those are, they still help save space, but they run about the same in some circumstances. You got to just kind of like watch it, but sometimes the M.2s are still a little bit more expensive as they're really just starting to gain traction in the last 4 years or so. They're actually starting to become the standard, and that square drive is going away now. All the new laptops that I see these days in industry, they primarily are using the M.2 drives. So they are pretty comparable in price. There's not a huge difference, but there's, a little bit of difference. From a hard drive perspective, the old spinning disc, which we'll get into more later, they still are a little bit cheaper. But, I mean, for what you're spending, if you want a terabyte of storage of an SSD, you're spending a bit more. Because, I mean, you can probably pick up a 3 terabyte drive for that kind of money. I mean, didn't quite look at them numbers, but I mean, yeah, they still are cheaper, but they have their limitations for sure. If you just need a 500 gig one, it's $72 now. It's pretty comparable. I mean, like, for what you're going to spend on a hard drive, you just as well cough up the extra $20-30 in some circumstances, depending on what your space restrictions are. Which you can manage your space restrictions, whether or not, like, put your files on your spinning disk, because they're not as important as like putting a game on a SSD, because that SSD on a game is going to be amazing. It will be amazing on a game. Gone are those slow hard drives for that stuff. That's another reason that we're going to get into here. But yeah, cost, they have become cost effective. That is the main point here. So at number 3 here, a good thing about these things, less maintenance. This is huge. So you used to have to defrag hard drives, right? You would pull up, install a third-party defragment thing, or use Windows defragment, because all the junk like would get spread across sectors and all that stuff. That is no longer a thing with SSDs. They do not recommend that you defrag them, and there's not really a need to, because the flash memory is so fast that it can just sort it all out. and it might write differently because on a hard drive it writes to a platter, a circular disk, and it can throw data across that, and then this arm goes back and forth, the read-write arm, to be able to read them files. So that's why it's so much slower, because you actually have moving parts, where in SSD it's all flash memory, it's all instant. So yeah, that's the huge thing. No maintenance. I don't like to do a whole lot of maintenance unless I have to. It's not something that I personally enjoy. Some people enjoy doing maintenance, but I do not prefer to do maintenance if I can get away with it. So that is why I put this at number 3. Less maintenance with SSDs. Amazing. So number 2, like I said earlier, they're becoming a standard. Gone are hard drives in personal machines and most business use machines in terms of what the users are doing. Now, they may not be going away on, great big like server storage and all that stuff. That's probably still using like high quality, expensive drives. I don't know what the cost numbers are on that. I don't work in data centers. But anyway, I would think that in that industry there, it's a little bit more iffy, even though the price comparison is getting a little bit better. So maybe they'll look into that more. And the fault tolerance on a drive, high quality, network storage drive might be a lot higher than your consumer grade SSD or a little bit heightened SSD. That's one good important thing to mention too. The failure rate between a hard drive and SSD from most tests is they're definitely effective enough where the SSD failure rate isn't overwhelming. I know from my environment perspective that I've worked in, SSDs have died just about as much as the hard drives have died. So, I mean, it was pretty comparable in those regards. So I don't really see the argument that SSDs die faster in an enterprise environment. So I think they're perfectly fine for home use, and that's why they're becoming the standard. If they weren't working, then people would not be using them. So that is why I put that at number 2. You got to stick with the tech times. You got to be up to date, and that's why you have to have an SSD, because it is becoming the standard. All right, number 1. Ultimately, when it comes right down to it, hard drives are slow. So there's that platter I'm talking about with that little read-write arm thingy-majigger. That's what reads the data and all that good mumbo-jumbo. So, yeah, that thing spins at like most consumer-grade hard drives spin about like 7,200 RPMs. So that thing's moving around 7,200 times in a minute when that drive is like in its full like read mode, like it's just going to town, moving files or something like that. So, yeah, that's pretty quick. They do make them to go faster. I know that, preferably if you have one, a lot of people say if you can get like, I don't know the exact numbers, like 10,000 something RPMs, definitely would be a little bit quicker for you. But yeah, with the flash memory, there's no moving parts. None of that stuff is going on inside of there. It's just pretty much a chip, So there's no moving arms that are spinning at 7,200 revolutions per minute. So it's just quicker. And that's why they're so popular, because they just go and they fly and they move, and they don't have that like lag that a hard drive has that keeps it from moving and doing stuff that it needs to do. It just happens instantly with an SSD. And that's why it's the number 1 reason to get rid of your hard drives if you can. I'm not saying get rid of all of them. I mean, you might have to have a lot of storage for something off to the side, sure. But when it comes to like your operating system, whether it be Windows or Linux or Mac or whatever, for your games, if you can, certainly put them on your SSD, because they're going to be faster and you're going to have a better time with them. That's all I have to say about this. So everybody have a wonderful day wherever you're at in the world, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you very much. Do not forget to like and subscribe to this video if you enjoyed this content for more. I really appreciate everybody for the input that they've already given me, and I hope that we continue to grow and to get better and better at this all the time. Thank you, and have a wonderful day, night, whatever. Thank you. Bye.